We looked at the top 15 right-handed pitchers, the top 10 catchers and the top 25 first basemen in baseball history. Now it's time to look at the best all-time shortstops in baseball history. There are villains and heroes among this group of players, guys whose character was admired and others whose integrity was questioned. Shortstop is one of the most difficult positions to play. The best player in Little League is usually the shortstop. The shortstop is the one who can hit and field and run and throw. In youth ball, you can find the shortstop batting third in the lineup and, when not playing shortstop, you'll find this player on the pitcher's mound. There have been plenty of offense-first shortstops in the major leagues, along with plenty of glove-first shortstops. Different periods of time have produced different types of shortstops. The 1970s was filled with weak-hitting shortstops with good gloves. They often batted second in the lineup and were masters of the sacrifice bunt and stole plenty of bases. The trend shifted a bit in the mid-1980s and, especially, into the 1990s when the Alex Rodriguez, Nomar Garciaparra, and Derek Jeter trio dominated the position. Even today, there are plenty of good-hitting shortstops in MLB lineups. There are so many, in fact, that it will be difficult to choose which of Manny Machado, Francisco Lindor, Carlos Correa, Andrelton Simmons or even Gene Segura will represent the AL in this year's All-Star Game. As with any all-time greats list, there will be disagreement. Some readers will wonder why so-and-so didn't even make the top 25. That's understandable. As explained in the top 25 catchers post, there was a method to the madness in creating this list. Two versions of wins above replacement WAR were used, those from Fangraphs and Baseball Reference, along with wins above average WAR. Wins above average gives a little more credit to very good seasons. Jaffe's Jaws list was also part of the discussion. In the end, 25 men made the cut and their careers span more than a century of baseball. Let's look at the 25 greatest shortstops in the history of the game. Sanford, FL, March 11th. Vern Stevens. Photo by Bruce Bennett Studios, Getty Images. Best all-time shortstops. Vern Stevens, he's tough, real tough. If you throw one to the outside corner, he's liable to hit it down the right field line for 2 or 3 bases. Pitcher Ed Lopat. About Vern Stevens. When Vern Stevens was a teenager, he played on the same American Legion baseball team as future Major League pitcher Bob Lemon. Imagine being a teenager and facing 2 future Major League players who would eventually make a combined 14 MLB All-Star teams. Stevens earned 8 of those All-Star appearances, first with the St. Louis Browns early in his career and then with the Boston Red Sox later. He led the league in home runs once and RBI once as a member of the Browns. He was also a key part of their 1944 World Series team, which was the only year the St. Louis Browns ever made the World Series. Stevens finished third in MVP voting that year. 3 years later, with the Browns sliding down the standings after their pennant-winning year, Stevens was the centerpiece of a deal that landed him with the Boston Red Sox. He was slotted into the lineup at the cleanup spot behind Ted Williams and had back-to-back seasons in 1949 and 1950 during which he led the league with 159 and 144 RBI. No shortstop ever had more RBI in a season than the 159 by Stevens. One criticism of Stevens during his career was the idea that he was lucky to play in Fenway Park. It's true that he took advantage of his home field when he was on the Red Sox. He hit .314, .395, .540 in 4-1-1 games at Fenway Park compared to career marks of .286, .355, .460. That being said, many players hit better at home than on the road. After a 3.0 HR, 144 RBI season in 1950, Stevens was limited to 109 games the following year because of injuries. His playing time continued to dwindle over the next few years, and he played his final Major League season in 1955 with the Baltimore Orioles and Chicago White Sox. After being released by the White Sox, Stevens had one last hurrah with the Seattle Rainiers of the Pacific Coast League. The team's manager, Fred Hutchinson, brought in a bunch of former major leaguers, including Stevens. They won the PCL title, and Stevens hit .338, .395, .525. He returned in 1956 but didn't play as well, and his baseball career was over. Baltimore, Maryland, circa 1972, Bert Campaneros. Campaneros played for the Athletics from 1964 to 76. Photo by Focus on Sport, Getty Images. Best all-time shortstops. Bert Campaneros. You can talk about Reggie Jackson, Catfish Hunter, and Sal Bando, all those great players, but it was Campy who made everything go. Charlie Finley, Athletics owner. Bert Campaneros was one of those 1970s shortstops who didn't hit much but was great in the field, stole bases, and laid down plenty of sacrifice bunts. His career WRC was 90, meaning he was 10% below average on offense after league and ballpark effects were taken into account. On the bases, Campy led the league in steals 6 times and had a stretch from 1965 to 1972 during which he averaged 51 steals per season. He also led the league in caught stealing 3 times. He didn't bunt as much early in his career, but when he was in his 30s, he bunted more often. In 1977 and 1978, he led the league in sacrifice bunts with 40 and 25, respectively. The Rangers had 6 different managers over those 2 seasons. Apparently, they all loved small ball. Long before he reached the major leagues, Campaneros was a boy playing baseball in Cuba. He was seen by a Kansas City Athletic scout at the Pan Am Games in Costa Rica in 1961 and offered a $1,000 signing bonus. He jumped at the chance and left Cuba not long before the Castro Revolution occurred. That made it much more difficult for baseball players to leave the country. After 2.5 minor league seasons, Campaneros made the big leagues in 1964. The next season, he would lead the league in steals and caught stealing. He also played all 9 positions in a game on September 8, 1965, after pitching both right-handed and left-handed in the 8th inning. The 5'10", 160-pounder played catcher, where he suffered an injury on a collision at the plate that caused him to miss 5 games. When Will Ferrell played all 9 positions in 5 spring training games 3 years ago, he did so to honor Campaneros. The Athletics moved from Kansas City to Oakland in 1968 and Campaneros had his first All-Star season. He led the league in plate appearances, hits, steals and caught stealing. The A's continued to improve and became a dynasty in the early 1970s. Campaneros was a key part of the teams that made the playoffs 5 straight years from 1971 to 1975. He was an All-Star the last 4 of those years and helped the A's win the World Series 3 straight years from 1972 to 1974, when free agency hit baseball in the mid-1970s. A's owner Charlie Finley couldn't keep the team together. Campaneros was among the many players who left the A's. He signed with the Texas Rangers and was an All-Star his first year in the Longhorn State, but his playing time dwindled when he hit .186, .245, .238 in 98 games in 1978. He would continue to struggle with the bat for most of the rest of his career. The Rangers traded him to the Angels in 1979. He played with the Angels through the 1981 season, then spent a year in the Mexican League. In 1983, he signed with the Yankees and had one last stretch of success, hitting .322, .355, .357 in a part-time role. After his playing career ended, Campaneros coached with a few teams, including the Seibu Lions in the Japanese League. He played in the Senior Professional Baseball Association in 1989 at the age of 47. He's also appeared at numerous old-timers games around the country. He just loved baseball. The best thing about Bancroft is, he can think. He uses his brain. He is more than a great mechanical player. A player like Banny at short means everything to a ball club. Huey Jennings. About Dave Bancroft. Dave Bancroft came up to the big leagues with the Philadelphia Phillies in 1915, just as the legendary Honus Wagner's career was winding down. Wagner was already in his 40s and would play through the 2017 season. In that 1915 season, the Pittsburgh Press wrote that Bancroft was developing into a second Honus Wagner. Bancroft was never the hitter that Wagner was, but he was the premier shortstop after Wagner retired. In his first year with the Phillies, Bancroft helped the team reach the World Series. They lost to the Boston Red Sox, but Bancroft hit .294 with a .368 on-base percentage. He played 5 full seasons and part of a 5th with the Phillies before being traded to the New York Giants in 1920. The Giants were managed by John McGraw, a lover of small ball tactics. Bancroft had the reputation of being a smart, gritty player who could execute the sacrifice bunts and hit and runs that McGraw favored. The move paid off when the Giants went to the World Series 3 straight years from 1921 to 1923. All 3 series were against the crosstown New York Yankees and the Giants won 2 of them. In some ways, John McGraw was the Bill Belichick of his time. Winning took precedent over sentimentality. Despite helping the Giants to 3 straight World Series appearances, the 32-year-old Bancroft was on the way out of New York. McGraw didn't hesitate to move on from Bancroft because he had a younger shortstop, Travis Jackson, waiting in the wings. Bancroft was traded to the Boston Braves, where he became the team's player-manager. His first season in Boston was subpar, but he bounced back with strong seasons in 1925 and 1926. He hit over .300 both years with on-base percentages of .400 and .399. He couldn't get the Braves to win much, though. After back-to-back 7th-place finishes in 1926 and 1927, he was dismissed. Bancroft played 2 seasons with the Brooklyn Robins before returning to the Giants in 1930. He was pretty much done as a player by then, going just 1 for 17. He retired after the season and moved into a coaching role as McGraw's second-in-command. When McGraw retired during the 1932 season and Bancroft was passed over for the role of manager, he finished out the year and retired from Major League Baseball. Despite moving on from the big leagues, Bancroft wasn't done with baseball. He managed teams in the Midwest in the 1930s and 40s, then managed 3 different all-women's teams in the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League, the league featured in the movie A League of Their Own. Jim Fregosi was a great athlete who earned all-league honors in football, basketball and baseball while growing up in San Francisco. He signed with the Red Sox out of high school rather than go to college on a football scholarship. He played 1 season in the minor leagues for the Red Sox before the Angels picked him in the expansion draft prior to the 1961 season. Just 19 years old, Fregosi got into 11 games with the Angels at the end of the 1961 season. He split time in the majors and minors in 1962, then became a full-time player with the Angels in 1963, hitting .287, .325, .422. For the next 7 years, Fregosi was a regular All-Star. The only year he didn't make the team was 1965. He made the team 5 years in a row from 1966 to 1970. His career numbers don't look impressive, but it must be remembered that he played many years during a pitcher's era. During a 9-year stretch from 1962 to 1970, Fregosi was above average on offense and very good with the glove. After the 1971 season, Fregosi was part of what's considered to be one of the worst trades in MLB history. The Angels traded him to the New York Mets for 4 players: Francisco Estrada, Leroy Stanton, Don Rose and Nolan Ryan. This was before Nolan Ryan became Nolan Ryan. At the time, he was a 25-year-old with a great arm, but no control. He'd already pitched 510 career innings and had an impressive 493 strikeouts, but they came with 344 walks and a roughly league average. Eric Ryan would go on to become one of the better pitchers in baseball history, while Fregosi saw his career prospects take a downturn. He played for the Mets, the Rangers and Pirates over the next 7 years, but never again had the success he'd had with the Angels. In his first 10 years in the big leagues, Fregosi was worth 41.6 WAR. Fangraphs. He ranks 7th all-time among shortstops through the age of 28, just behind Robin Yount. In his final 8 seasons, he was worth just 2.6 WAR. After his playing career ended, Fregosi turned to managing and won over 1,000 games with 4 teams. He had his biggest success with a 1993 Philadelphia Phillies squad that looked like a bunch of beer league softball players. There were more mullets on that Phillies team than at a Garth Brooks concert. It was the team of John Kruk, Lenny Dykstra, Darren Daulton, Mitch Williams and Curt Schilling. They won 97 regular season games and made it all the way to the World Series, where they lost to the Toronto Blue Jays in 6 games. When my father asked me to be always a number one, I always kept that on my mind. I think I didn't disappoint him. I wanted him to be proud of me, and I know he definitely was. That's the achievement of my life. Luis Aparicio was the son of one of the best baseball players in Venezuela, but the elder Aparicio never got a chance to play Major League Baseball. Luis got his chance after starring in the Baseball Amateur World Series in 1953, which was played in Caracas. He then played in Venezuela's first national tournament and Major League teams were hot on his tail. He signed with the White Sox. It took a few years for Aparicio to reach the major leagues. He got there in 1956 and immediately led the league in stolen bases and won the AL Rookie of the Year award. He then led the league in steals for the next 8 years and was an All-Star for 7 straight years. Not only could he steal bases, he was also recognized for his defense, winning 9 Gold Gloves in his career. In 1959, Aparicio was part of the Go-Go White Sox team that went to the World Series for the first time since the 1919 Black Sox. They lost to the Dodgers in 6 games, but Aparicio hit .308 with a .357 OBP. He finished second in AL MVP voting as his teammate and middle infield partner, Nellie Fox, won the award. Aparicio played 3 more seasons with the White Sox before being traded to the Baltimore Orioles after the 1962 season. In Baltimore, he took up residence at shortstop next to the incredible Brooks Robinson at third base. With Aparicio and Robinson holding down the left side of the infield, the 1966 Orioles made it to the World Series, where they beat the Los Angeles Dodgers in a 4-game sweep. After one more season with Baltimore, Aparicio was traded back to the Chicago White Sox. He played there for 3 seasons, then finished out his career with 3 seasons with the Boston Red Sox. He made the All-Star team 3 years in a row at the ages of 36, 37, and 38. When his career was over, he'd played more games at shortstop than anyone in the history of the game. In 1984, Aparicio was the first Venezuelan to be elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. In 2006, the Chicago White Sox honored him with a statue at U.S. Cellular Field that sits in tandem with the statue of his longtime double-play partner, Nellie Fox. He was named the Athlete of the 20th Century in Venezuela and is considered the godfather of Venezuelan shortstops who followed him to the big leagues. When I was a boy, I'd walk around with a pocket full of rocks or a Coca-Cola top, and I can't remember not being able to hit them with a broomstick handle. Joe said, well, if you've heard of Joe Sewell, you've likely heard just how difficult he was to strike out. He struck out just 114 times in his career. That's in 8,329 plate appearances. He struck out once every 73 times he walked to the plate. A closer look makes what Sewell accomplished even more impressive. More than half of his career strikeouts came in his first 4 full seasons. Starting with his fifth full season, Sewell struck out 48 times in 5,539 plate appearances over 9 seasons. That's one strikeout every 115 plate appearances. In 1932, he struck out just 3 times in 576 plate appearances. He also walked 56 times that year. We'll never see that kind of ratio of walks to strikeouts again. Baseball was different in those days, but Sewell still stood out. As a comparison to 2018, the MLB leader in strikeouts this season is Joey Gallo, with 91 whiffs in 258 plate appearances. If Gallo continues to strike out at his current rate, he'll reach Sewell's career total before the All-Star break. Gallo's longest streak of games without at least one strikeout is just 3. Sewell once went 115 games without striking out. Avoiding the strikeout was Sewell's defining characteristic, but his career was unusual in other ways as well. He was one of 3 Sewell brothers to play in the major leagues, along with Luke and Tommy. His cousin, Rip, was also a big leaguer. Sewell's promotion to the major leagues was unusual. After playing college ball at Alabama, Sewell signed with a minor league team in New Orleans, considered an A-ball team. When Cleveland shortstop Ray Chapman died after being hit by a Carl Mays pitch in the summer of 1920, the team plugged in Harry Lunte at shortstop. Lunte pulled a muscle in September and Sewell's contract was purchased from New Orleans. With just 92 games in A-ball under his belt, the 21-year-old Sewell was as raw as they come. He didn't own his own bat, so teammate George Burns gave him one. Sewell called the bat Black Betsy, and used it for the rest of his career. It was an impressive career. Sewell didn't hit many home runs but regularly pounded out 40 or more doubles. He was an above-average hitter, .312, .391, .413, and a good fielder. He played 11 years with Cleveland and 3 with the Yankees, earning MVP votes in 8 seasons, including 2 top 4 finishes. American baseball player Joe Tinker, 1880–1948, of the Chicago Cubs stands at the plate during batting practice on the field at West Side Grounds, Chicago, Illinois, 1909. An unidentified catcher stands behind him. Photo by Chicago History Museum. Getty Images. Best all-time shortstops. Joe Tinker. These are the saddest of possible words. Tinker to Evers to Chance. Trio of Bear Cubs, and fleeter than birds. Tinker to Evers to Chance. Ruthlessly pricking our gonfalon bubble. Making a giant hit into a double. Words that are heavy with nothing but trouble. Tinker to Evers to Chance. Franklin Pierce Adams. I know better than anyone else that my time is near. I've had a good life, and you don't stop and complain at this stage of the game. I've made some mistakes, and I'd like to stay around a little longer and overcome them, but there isn't time. I'll miss baseball. That I know. Joe Tinker. Context is important when looking at baseball statistics. On the surface, Joe Tinker's career batting line of .262, .308, .353 is unimpressive by today's standards, but it must be remembered that he played in the dead ball era. In his time, Tinker was a slightly below-average hitter. His career 96 WRC is slightly better than Jimmy Rollins' 95 WRC, even though Rollins hit .264, .324, .418. Tinker is famous for being part of the poem quoted above. He's the shortstop who turned double plays with Johnny Evers, the second baseman, and Frank Chant, the first baseman. They were all important members of the Chicago Cubs during the most successful run in franchise history. Cubs made the World Series 4 times in 5 years from 1906 to 1910. They won the World Series in 1907 and 1908, both against Ty Cobb and the Detroit Tigers, but the 1906 team was the best of the bunch in the regular season. They won an MLB record 116 games against just 36 losses. The 2001 Seattle Mariners tied the Cubs' 116 wins but lost 46 games. On the field, Tinker excelled at small ball. He regularly stole 30 or more bases and had double-digit sacrifice bunts in every full season he played. He was particularly successful against one of the Cubs' biggest rivals at the time, the New York Giants. Tinker hit .309, .339, .451 against them. Their star pitcher, Christy Mathewson, once said Tinker was the worst man I have to face in the National League, and Tinker is a hard man to beat at the game of wits. Baseball field, engraving, United States of America, 19th century. Photo by DeGassini, Getty Images. Best all-time shortstops. Jack Glasscock. Jack Glasscock was among the greatest shortstops of the 19th century. Playing without a glove until late in his career, he led the National League shortstops in fielding percentage 6 times and was described by Al Spink as one of the greatest players from a fielding standpoint the game has ever known. Robert L. T-Man. Jack Glasscock made his debut when the National League was just into its 4th year of existence. He started with the 1879 Cleveland Blues. He played second base and third base in his first year, but would soon move to the position for which he's most known, shortstop. According to sabermetrician Charles Faber, Glasscock and his teammates at second base and first base, Silver Bill Phillips and Fred Dunlap, were the best double-play combination of the 1880s. Fielding was Glasscock's calling card. He ranks 11th all-time among shortstops in the Fangraphs fielding metric, just ahead of Kiwi Reese. On offense, his 110 WRC is 44th among shortstops, tied with John Valentine. Baseball was different in those days. The only major league was the National League when Glasscock first started, but another league would sprout up to challenge the NL. Glasscock played with the Blues in the NL for 5+ seasons before jumping to the newly formed Union Association in 1884. He readily admitted he did it for the money. I have played long enough for glory, now it is a matter of dollars and cents. When the Union Association collapsed after one season, Glasscock returned to the National League and was assigned to the St. Louis Maroons. The Maroons went belly-up following the 1886 season, and everyone wondered where Glasscock would end up next. There was no free agency at the time. If there were, Glasscock could have looked for the best deal he could find. Instead, the league transferred players from St. Louis to Indianapolis. Glasscock played 3 seasons with the Hoosiers, with his final season with the team being his best. He hit .352, .390, .467 and was worth 6.5 WAR. Fangraphs. Indianapolis lost its franchise at that point, and Glasscock was transferred to the New York Giants, where he hit .336, .395, .439. By this time, Glasscock was heading into his age 33 season. He suffered a hand injury in 1891 that affected his hitting and fielding. Over the last 5 years of his career, he played with 5 different teams before being released midway through the 1895 season. After his major league career ended, Glasscock returned to where he'd grown up in Wheeling, West Virginia and played for his hometown team in the Iron and Oil League. He continued to find teams to play for in different leagues through the 1901 season when he was 43 years old. Page 2 FLUSHING, New York, July 25, 1964, L2R, Eddie Stanky.